Hi, folks. I'm really looking forward to this video because it's going to make everything that we've seen so far in the series concrete, and it's really going to bring everything close to make it easier to see the big picture. Before I go into the video, I want to let you know I shouldn't make these videos at 1 o'clock in the morning because I overlooked one of my notes. No, it's not really a big impact, but I want to correct it now before somebody else does. It's going to make things a little bit more specific. In the previous video, I said that the word good was a subject complement. Good is not being used as a subject complement. What it's being used as is an adverb, and it's modifying listen, and it's telling you how or what to listen to. So that's going to kind of become important in this video. So I just wanted to make that correction now. So for those of you that watched the previous video, just remember that. Okay, now before we go on, I also want to thank a couple of people that contacted me to show appreciation for the series. And they pointed out a couple of things that were making them still not totally understand what was going on. So I explained it in more detail to them, and now they have a thorough understanding. So I kind of want to take this time here before I get into the summary and explain a couple things to you. Like I said, Forrest Fenn had always told us to read the poem, okay? Read the poem and make sure that you understand the poem. The poem is the most critical thing in here. Now, it's important that you not only read it passively, you actually have to understand exactly what he's saying. And it becomes important here because we know that ultimately this poem leads us to a treasure chest. It's not just something that we're going to curl up in a corner and read casually. I'm not being condescending here, but let me just remind you of a couple things because a lot of people will get gold fever and they try to rush through this and jump immediately to a map to locate locations based on vague descriptions before they even understand the poem. That's not a good thing to do. You got to remember the context here. The context is the poem itself. You got to, when you sit down to read the poem, you got to put yourself in a quiet location and you got to focus on the poem the same way that you would focus on any story that you're reading. And a story is basically a written or spoken account of imaginary or real people and events. Forrest Fenn said to use your imagination. Right? His poem is doing two things. It's going to use an imaginary story that's ultimately going to lead to real locations. When you're reading a book, it's really common that the writer is going to make up fictitious locations. Now, obviously, when you're reading a book, and I say, I used to work for a store named Big Green's Supermarket. You're not going to jump to a map when you're reading a book and try to find Big Jim Green's Supermarket, right? You're just reading it passively. So the only place that Big Jim Green's Supermarket exists is in the story that you're reading. And I want you to look at all of the clues that way while we're reading a poem. Forget about a map. When you come across something like where warm waters halt, don't hesitate and try to figure out where that is. When you read line 5, it says begin it where warm waters halt. So right then and there, just assume that warm waters halt is there. Maybe you want to take a note of things as you read it on the side, just so that you can make reference to it. Because just like in a real story, when I mention Big Jim Green's Supermarket, I'm probably going to refer back to it later when I'm discussing the place that I work. So I'm not going to repeat what it is. And that's where the next thing comes in, pronouns. Think of algebra, okay? When you have a variable such as x, and I tell you to go ahead and solve for x. The only way that you're able to do that is if you know what the problem is, right? I can't just go up to you and say solve for x without giving you the problem. And your solution becomes the answer to x. So when you're reading the poem and you see something like a pronoun like, there, where, or it, Remember that those are placeholders for nouns. And a noun in writing, of course, could be a single word, or it could be a phrase, an entire sentence, or an entire clause, right? It's basically holding the name of a person, place, or thing. So it is kind of like X in our algebra problem. It is going to become something. Just like when I say solve for X, I could say solve for it. And your answer then becomes it. Now remember that, because as I pointed out in the poem, we have a rhetorical question, which means that Forrest Fenn is supplying the answers within the poem. So the answer in the poem is going to become it. And once you understand how everything is all connected, that we're going to do in this video, you will then be able to read the poem and know what you're reading, and it makes it a lot simpler to solve the clues. Okay, so the next thing we know, like I said, is that the poem is a map. A map is a diagrammatic or descriptive representation of a geographic area. Now, he said the poem is a map. In this case, it's descriptive. There are no pictures in the poem. Now, a map is created to give somebody instructions to get from a very specific starting location to a destination. Now, that's important, and I said this before in previous videos. If you wanted to know where the Grand Canyon is in the United States, I have to know where you are if you ask me how to get there. It's impossible for me to give you locations without knowing where you're starting from. Let's say that you started in, California. Well, I'm going to put you on a highway and I'm going to head you setting east, all right, on that highway. And I'm going to tell you which highway to get from your place in California to the Grand Canyon. Well, suppose I gave that same map or directions to somebody that lived in New York. I would end up sending them out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, because the map, the directions no longer work because you don't know the starting location. So in the poem, we have kind of a double-edged sword, because we know that the poem is going to take us to a hidden treasure. So it being a map that leads us to treasure means that we have to use the poem to get to the destination. That's the whole point of the poem, to lead you to the treasure. But you got to remember that Forrest was faced with a dilemma here, because he doesn't know where the searchers are starting from. So what he did in the poem, and he kind of hinted at this all over the place. He said, the first thing you need to know is where to begin it. You have to know where to begin. If you don't know where to begin, you're going to just have a good vacation and the poem will lead you anywhere. And he said, not enough people are putting a focus on where to begin it, the big picture. And he said it over and over when he was talking about the lady. He asked them directions on how to get to a supermarket. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going to go to the parking lot." And he turned around and he said, No, you're not. You're going to get in your car. And what he was hinting at is that, how do you know where the parking lot is? You don't even know where the store is yet. So he's getting you from a very specific location, not a region, a very specific location to a destination. And the poem will lead you precisely to that destination only if you start at the correct location. So now, when you're reading the poem, okay, when you read begin it, where? Begin it where? We can stop right there. You should have two questions immediately. You know that he's telling you to begin something, which is it. Now, it is something we should already know. And then he's telling you begin it where? We don't know where is. So for now, where is going to be right there in the poem. We're going to begin it where warm water salt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. Then he gives us another instruction. Put in below the Homer Brown. Same thing applies here. Don't worry about the Homer Brown. When you're reading a book, you don't go and start jumping in a map and a dictionary to look at the places the author is describing. because it's not relevant yet at this time point in time. It's only relevant within the story itself. Just like everything he describes in there is only relevant to the story. So the Homer Brown is essentially everything above the line that's just put in below the Homer Brown. So look at it that way. Just remember that. Now, the other thing I want you to remember is the poem should work on its own, and the poem purists are going to love me for this. And I'm sticking to it this time. I'm not using any backstory. I don't care that Forrest went to Yellowstone. I don't care that he lived in Santa Fe. I don't care that he was an art dealer. I don't care that he loved fishing. None of that stuff is mentioned in the poem. It's not relevant. I'm not even going to use the thrill of the chase at this point. You can use it for hints, but there's hints in the poem. The poem has to stand alone as a unit. The only things that we need to know in order to use the poem by itself is one, this poem is a map that leads to treasure. Two, because we know what map and directions mean, like any map, it's all based on starting at the correct location. And the other thing we needed to know was that it's in the United States, in the Rocky Mountains, or in the continental contiguous United States. In other words, it's not in Alaska, it's not in Hawaii. It's in the United States, and specifically, it's in the Rocky Mountains. Now, I know eventually he ruled out states, and we ended up with only 4 states: Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. Well, we don't really need to know that, because when you figure out what the poem means, it's not going to send you anywhere other than the correct state to begin with, number one. Number two, you don't really need to know that it was north of Santa Fe, because the Rocky Mountains pretty much begin at the southern border of Santa Fe, and they go north. They don't go south. So you know it's not south of New Mexico, right? So, and it's not south of Santa Fe. The only reason, and this is not really relevant, but the only reason why Forrest Fenn said north of Santa Fe eventually is because he wanted to keep the crazy people out of his house. So it's not in San Lazaro. It's not in Santa Fe. It's north of Santa Fe, but technically we don't really need to know that. And there's a lot of things going on here that we know, and try to put all of that out of your mind because you don't really need to know it. Now, if you were reading the book, you know that the paragraph prior to the poem is telling you that he basically put a piece of himself in the treasure chest in the form of 2 things: his hair, or DNA, and he put it in an autobiography so that the person who finds the chest will know something about the person that found it. And we also, of course, know that he initially intended to commit suicide and die near the chest. So the poem itself is almost like a story instead of a suicide note. But we don't really need to know that either. It's going to explain everything that we do need to know in the poem. But I just want to say that because he left a lot of hints. You know, he told Ralph Lauren said, "Why do you care about all this stuff? You can't take it with you when you die." And Forrest Fenn told him, "Well, who says I can't?" And you know what? Forrest Fenn's right. Even now that he passed away, once he put a piece of his DNA in his autobiography within or among or with the treasures, he is in that chest. Whether he's alive or dead, he was in that chest with his treasures both. The point. But you don't really need to know that because you could read the poem as if it's the speaker or the writer of the poem. You don't necessarily need to know that unless you want to use your imagination and perhaps say that the speaker of the poem is not just Forrest Fenn. It's Forrest Fenn speaking from a spiritual perspective. He's inside the chest and he's drawing you to him. Maybe like dropping breadcrumbs, whatever. He's leading you to him using the clues. And the other parts of the poem that are not clues are hints to help you solve the clues. So now let's move on to the actual story that I got that done. But really, it's important when we're doing this that you understand we're not trying to solve the clues yet. We're only examining the poem to understand how it's working, what the big picture is, so that we can then use that to create our solution. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so first off, please excuse how everything is on the screen pre-done. Normally I do everything interactively with you, but instead of having to refer to notes, I kind of want to do this on the fly. So I did this just to remind myself what I'm talking about because it's pretty complicated here and hopefully I don't miss anything. Oh, and one more thing. I'm not going to go over what's a verb, what's an adverb, all the phrases and stuff like that because we already did that. That was the whole point of it. So I want to try to keep this relatively quick. So the first thing here in the first stanza is he's telling you what he did. Okay. He's telling you, like, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures pulled. It's an opening saying what he was doing and what that enabled him to do. As I was walking down the street, I was able to meet some people from work. And here's what that enabled him to do it enabled him to keep his secret where and hint of riches new and old. So now we get to the second stanza. Now remember, we're going to be referring back to here right off the bat because he says he's telling you, begin it. So right there you say, well, what is it? And a lot of people are going to say it's the quest. And I'm going to say not necessarily. Because where in here does it tell you that you're beginning a quest? It doesn't. So we're going to begin doing what he did up here. We're going to go alone in there and with the treasured bold, and we're going to locate the secret because he used the word can here. I can keep. He didn't say I keep my secret where. He said I can. And remember, this is enabling him to do that. So what we're going to try to do is reveal his secret where. So now we're reading it here again. Remember what I just told you. We're going to begin it. So we're going to begin following in his footsteps. We're going to begin his quest, if you want to look at it that way. And here we go. It's going to say begin it where. We have a pronoun where. Begin it where. We don't know where is yet, but he's telling us. He's saying, and remember, these clues do not exist in the physical world yet. They're only in the poem and they're right where you see them. Okay. So where do we begin his procedure? Well, we begin it where warm water salt and take it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. And then he's telling us to put in below the Homer Brown. Not far, but too far to walk. Notice he said in the canyon. He didn't say to the mouth of the canyon or to the base of the canyon. He said in the canyon. So that means somewhere in there. And he doesn't tell us precisely where, but he does tell us that if we're standing where warm waters halt, it's gonna be too far to walk to where we need to put in. And we don't know where the Homer Brown is yet, but how do you know? And I'm just going to ask you this now, just to put something in your head, that he didn't just get done describing or giving you a hint as to the Homer Brown is the area where warm water salt and where the canyon down is, and, where it's taking it. Imagine that, Forrest is walking, right? And let's just assume now, because he said use your imagination, that Forrest is in the treasure chest. That the treasure chest somehow got into a river or a lake. Okay. So we have a river or a lake, and you're going to take a note of that. We have some place called the Homer Brown. Okay. And Forrest went in that boundary, within the boundary or within that area. And then we know we're talking about a treasure chest. So that let's say the treasure chest went into the headwaters, and that current of the headwaters took it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. So he doesn't want us to go there. So let me pull this into a paint program to kind of draw it out for you. So let me kind of draw this out to you. We have an area, okay, and he's calling it the Homer Brown. This is the border of the Homer Brown, all right? And somewhere within there is where warm waters halt, okay? So let's say that warm waters halt over here. And he's telling you that he went in there, okay? So he's somewhere in here. And if warm waters halt, they're probably starting something like a river or a creek, and we'll get to that in a moment. So we have that river or creek or whatever, and it begins where warm waters halt, goes down, And then somewhere over here, a canyon forms up in the Homer Brown. Okay, so this is the mouth of the canyon. The water's going into that canyon. Okay. Now, somewhere he wants you to put in, and he's telling you that it's going to be down. So in this case, we're downstream. So he wants you to put in here because the distance from here to here is near, okay? But it's not near enough that you could walk, or maybe it's too dangerous. Maybe there's a cliff. Maybe there's something here that's preventing you from going from this direction down. But the treasure itself did take that trip. So he left a breadcrumb here, and then he's flowing down the river, okay? And somewhere in here, he put the treasure chest because he's telling us that it's near, but we can't walk to it. So there's something, and I'm going to say a road because that's simple, that comes down, and it's the same road. In other words, we're gonna get away from where warm water salt. We're gonna hop in our car at the parking lot, and we're gonna follow this down the mountain. Okay, we're going down to a lower elevation because he said below the Homer Brown. So we're going to follow whatever it is, and we can't walk. So we're going to take some motorized vehicle or a helicopter, what have you. I mean, realistically, we're gonna take a car, right? Because we can't walk. So we're following that road down, and then we're going to get to a location that he wants us to put in. Okay, now that road obviously keeps going, and so does this creek or river. Okay, you see what I'm saying here? So we're at a crossroads here at this X. That's a crossroads. It's not necessarily where the chest is. You're still in your car at this point. I shouldn't have used an X. This is just a crossroads. It's an intersection. So he wants us to get off that road. And what he's doing is he's telling us to put in somewhere between here and the Homer Brown. And that's where his treasure is going to be. So let's say that his treasure chest is somewhere over here, okay, on that side of the river. When we put in, we're going to take a road, a different road this time. So let me draw it in a different color. We're going to drive to a location that we can then park. And this is going to be labeled somehow. This is going to be a place that's going to tell us something. And I'm going to get to that probably in my solution. But anyway, imagine that you park here now. So this is the closest place that you can get within walking distance of the chest. So there's probably, not probably, there is going to be some kind of a blaze that we're looking at over here. That, right? There's something that we're heading to over here. But the treasure chest is not next to or near this trail. We're likely going to have to go off trail, ford the creek, and then find a physical place here. So basically, in the next stanza, we're at this intersection. He's saying from there, meaning from there, the place he wants you to put in below the Homer Brown. From there, now you see where I have the red line. He's saying from there, it. He's referring back to this it. Okay? Because these pronouns are going to use what's after them, right? So it is referring to this. This is referring to this. This is referring to this. Right? The red line is telling us essentially where we came from. He's giving you a better description of this area within the Homer Brown and where warm water salt. He's telling you that this area is no place for the meek, and the end is ever drawing nigh. Okay. So he's telling you that way. But what he's telling you here is the place that you put in, because he's talking a different tense here. Okay. He's saying there will be no paddle up your creek. So he's telling us that this is a creek right off the bat. It's not a river, it's a creek. And this canyon, incidentally, probably ends somewhere around here. Okay. Starts up in the mountain, and then now we're at the base of the mountain, and we drove down and we're coming across the river, and we're going to head to a place that we're going to park. And from here, there's probably a sign that says what this leads to. Okay. What is this feature? Well, he's telling us there'll be no Popper Creek, just heavy loads and water high. Somewhere here, there's going to be a sign, and probably at the parking area too, or kiosks or something like that, that is going to describe a feature that's over here. And that feature is being described by heavy loads and water high. This is the direction he wants you to go, up along here. Okay. This is where you're coming from. So that again, these two lines are describing this area back up here. And this is telling you what you should see in the direction from that intersection of where you're headed. He's asking you again, he's saying, if you have been wise and have found the blaze, there's a blaze somewhere over here. And I'm not going to get into it until I get to Saab, right? So he's telling you, if you've been wise and found the blaze, these two, look at wise and look at the definition of found. Wise and found. All right. Look at those two things, and it'll kind of give you a hint. And I don't want to get into it because it involves talking about the solution, and I'm not going to do that now. I'm trying to keep this clean and keep it all relevant to the poem. Okay. Now, this area here, he said the clues are contiguous, right? Which means they touch each other. So I have all 9 clues right here. Now, this I'm treating as one unit because he's basically giving you a condition, and that whole thing as a group is a condition and a result. He's telling you what to do if the condition's met. So those 2 lines are acting as one clue. So we have 9 clues. 1 clue, 2 clues, 3 clues, 4 clues, 5 clues, 6 clues, 7 clues, 8 clues, 9 clues. They're contiguous, they're one after each other. Look up these words again. This is a verb. Tarry scant with marvel gaze. I kind of joked about that and I went over it. And again, I don't want to get into a solution. A tarry scant could be a short sojourn, going to a campsite, going to a lodge, going to a hotel that's near something that people will go to. It's a marvel. In other words, it's a historical place like the Grand Canyon that people will go to marvel gaze. Okay. So imagine, and I joked, I said, we're looking for a room to stay temporarily, short amount of time, and we want a room with a gaze. Now, this line is going to have 2 different meanings. The first meaning is going to depend on whether or not you have the physical chest. Right now, we don't. Okay. So we can't take the chest to go in peace. Now, the reason why I'm saying go in peace is because when you're in an area of meek, okay, when you leave this, it's a 2-way hint. The area of the home of Brown is a place of peace. Okay. So this area here is actually probably part of that area of peace. So he said that this is church is in the mountains. So this is probably some historical sacred place. And just like a church, when you leave, they're going to tell you to go in peace. So we're leaving the area of peace and we're going down here. When we're here, it's referring back to no place for the meek. But you can look at it the other way too. When you leave an area of peace, you're no longer in an area for the meek. I know that sounds confusing, but you got to read the poem and really, really think about what he's saying. Now, I underline to cease because to cease means to end, okay? And this is going to become important in the solution. Look quickly down your quest to cease. The quest could cease here, all right? We have a cease when we halt, and of course, we cease at the end of the poem. Now, this is telling you a rhetorical question. So, why is it? So, why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? He's asking you two things. Forrest is providing the answers, and that's how we know it's rhetorical. And he's giving you the answers, and they are I've done it tired, and now I'm weak. Now, you'll notice that I have these words highlighted in green. That's because they rhyme. Meek, creek, seek, weak. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But basically, this is answering this question, and then this is answering another question. When we go down to the next one, he's telling you again. So he's telling you to perform an action. Hear me. Now, me is referring to the speaker. So everywhere the speaker is doing something, he's telling you to go back and pay attention over your poem. Now, since we're not boots on the ground and we're only reading and we didn't find the chest, we can't go in peace. We're not going to forget about all this stuff because all of this stuff is a hint that we're going to need, like Tyrus Scanlon Marble Gaze. But we don't have the chest. We're not going anywhere yet, right? So he's telling you to go back and listen and hear the poem and listen good. Okay. That's another verb. Listen good. How should I listen? You should listen good. But he's got another hint here. Good. And I'm going to get to that in a second. And then he's telling your effort will be worth the cold if you do that. I'm going to get to the meaning of that in a second. If you are brave and in the wood, two different traits. I'm going to get to that in a second. I give you title to the goal. The end. We did go down to the end of the quest till we ceased. Now we need to go marble gaze at and study everything now that we know how the phrasing is broken up. But we need to perform to hear me all and listen good. So let me go to another screen. And before I go, let me copy what I have here. Okay, I added a couple of more lines here. Let me show you what I'm getting at here. Like we were down here before. So I told you, and leave my trove for all to seek. That's referring back up to here. Okay. And then I'm not going to get into these too deep because it involves a solution. I'm going to do that in the next video. I want to keep it separate from the analysis. But remember, he said, hear me all. And what he's doing is he's telling you to go back and look at the rhyme. If we look at the big picture here, we could see that bold and old rhyme with cold and gold. Meek and creek rhyme with seek and weak. That's the only place that we have that rhyme pattern broken. It's not A B A B A B A B. No, he changes it, and he's telling you to go back and listen and pay attention to how these are referring back. Okay, back to the other rhyming words that he has, because the answers that he's providing here are giving us hints back to these descriptions. They're helping solve these clues. All right. Because you're not going to be able to solve them without using the hints. All the stanzas matter. It's not like other channels have told you that the first is just telling you some fluff that he went on a chase, and then this one is just fluff telling you, some kind of thing or another, and this one down here is giving you legal permission to the chest. No, that's not what it's doing. So he's telling you, and good is actually hinting that you should look at the rhymes. Good wood, okay? Good and wood. And those are going to help you in the solution. Your effort will be worth the cold. I give you title to the gold. Now, I'm at least going to do that much now. So when he's telling you to cold, okay, he's going back up to bold and old. This is the independent clause, right? This is the important clause. I can keep my secret where, and hint of riches new and old. So your effort to figure out where he went is going to be worth the cold. You understand what I mean? So he's setting you back up here because this is the big picture. Now, worth the cold is telling you it's going to be a hint of riches new and old, is pointing back to treasures bold. That's the gold. So the title to the gold is actually treasures bold. Yep. The title to the gold is treasures bold. Now, don't get me wrong. When we're boots on the ground, there may in fact be something inside the chest, like a proxy or a title. But right now, we're only working in the poem. And this is the title to the gold. Hit the riches new and old, treasure bold. So that is the title that we were looking for. And that there, let me go into the bigger picture again. So that there is the big picture, folks. That's how the poem works. If you want to find out about how I broke down the individual stanzas, this is in part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6. Go back and look at those videos and you'll know how I broke down the meaning of all the words. I didn't go to a dictionary and define them because that's what you do to solve the poem. Now that you understand how it works. Okay. I'm not going to go and look the stuff up, but you have enough information in this video series to do that and come up with a solve, especially now that you have a thorough understanding of the big picture. And this is probably the first time you've seen it. Certainly anywhere on YouTube and on the internet, you've never seen the poem broken down like this. And almost every place I've seen any solve, nobody's broken it down, the poem down like this, number one. Number two, they all gloss over all of this stuff. Number three, you'll see that the solutions all begin with them going to a map, with the exception of a couple of people. And it's interesting because those exceptions are the people that happen to be the same ones that are using my solve and Sam Smith's solve that is based on try the wheel. That is the solve. And I could prove it. And I'm going to do a short video since I don't need to explain anything anymore. The next video is going to be relatively short and it's going to be the same solution with some minor changes that you've already seen. And it's unquestionable, it's undeniable that it's the solve. In fact, the finder can't come out with a solve without plagiarizing stuff that I put out there on behalf of Sam Smith since 2016. This stuff has been published for years. I can guarantee you that Jack, if he's the finder, knows everything I'm showing you here because he got it from us. And hence, I believe that's the reason why he would just rather not give the solve out or the location out at all. I know that Forrest didn't mind the place being known. I've proven that to you. So at this point, maybe whoever really found the chest is backed into a corner because the minute they come out and explain the solve, and the minute they do anything that I've already shown you since 2016, they're not going to be able to say that they solved it on their own. They had to have solved it using the information we put out there. Now, what I believe Jack did, because we didn't certainly go into this kind of detail, is if Jack is the finder, we solved 90% of the poem. He did the last 10%. He figured out the ending before we did. He figured out this part before we did. And then the second thing he did, and this makes him the finder, is he went and actually retrieved the chest. So although we could never claim to be the finders because we didn't retrieve the chest, we most certainly can claim that we solved the poem. And like I said, the poem has probably many solutions that people can use. And it'll take them to their special spot. But there's only one true solution that'll lead you to Forrest Fenn position spot where Forrest Fenn wanted to die with his treasure chest. Only one solve is going to accomplish that. And that's my solve, in my opinion. Of course, I don't have the treasure chest to prove it, and Forrest Fenn is no longer here. But I am confident. It's undeniable. And the evidence that Jack talked about, the evidence has already been provided to you. I'm telling you how and why it's going to work now. Okay. And Jack confirmed to me in an email, like I said previously. I asked him, Jack, did you leave anything behind at the location where the treasure chest was in order to continue to chase or what have you? His answer was direct: no, I did not leave anything behind. I will not be doing another chase, and nothing is left behind. So I then replied to him. I said, I want to make sure you're telling me that. Okay. So does that mean that I should abandon working on my solution? Because I want to know where it was. And so does Sam. We want closure. And so do 350,000 other searchers. And his reply was, well, I can't give out, or I'm not going to give out the solution. I'm paraphrasing here, right? But there's enough evidence, he said, to prove beyond a doubt that that's where the treasure chest was. Now, I'm going to go and speculate here, and I'm going to say that Forrest Fenn probably bought the treasure chest back from Jack so that Jack didn't have to deal with selling it to a third party, and Jack could just go away in peace. Okay? Because remember, before Forrest died, Jack wanted to remain anonymous. Okay? So nobody was going to know who Jack was. Now, I believe that Forrest had Jack sign a legal document that prohibits Jack from revealing the location or the solution. Now, Forrest Fenn may have an ulterior motive for having done that, but I believe he did it, even though I can't prove it. Because in no way is that statement that Jack made saying Forrest didn't want to know and true. In no way is that true. I believe the reason why Forrest Fenn did not come out and cheer and smile and give Jack all kinds of props is because Forrest knows that another party worked on this solution for 7 years. They were nice enough to share that information. And then somebody came along, and instead of using the information to collaborate with them, they went ahead and solved the last 10% of the poem and went there and retrieved the chest. Now, Forrest Fenn is an honest man. Yes, I'm saying that now. I don't care that he dug graves. So do archaeologists. That doesn't have anything to do with his honesty. He was a salesman. Okay, so salesmen have the tendency to alter not the truth, but to use rhetoric in such a way that it's going to benefit them and their ultimate goal. But Forrest Fenn is not a bad person, but he is also not a cheat. When you listen to people on the internet, on blogs and in videos that brag about how much they were friends with Forrest and how many times they talked to him, you have two different types of people like that. Okay. One of them were genuine friends of Forrest Fenn. I just don't want to name everybody. I want to name them. They were friends of Forrest, but they were never pestering him for clues. Okay. I'm not going to name the people who were pestering him for clues. You can find them all over the place. Okay. They're the ones that have the YouTube channels and they're out creating the drama right now and lying about there being a Chase 2.0 without any proof to back any of this stuff up. They're the ones out there making up these bogus GPS solves and forcing all their bias in there just because they're so determined to have a documentary or something made, because they want to remain in the limelight as long as possible to milk the Forrest Fenn name and this chase for money. And it really annoys me. And I made that known. And I know for sure, although they never responded to me, the Fenn family knows how I feel about it. I've never been paid by anybody. I didn't do any of this to try to gain money from the community or anybody. And Forrest Fenn, being an honest man, had to give it to Jack. It doesn't matter how much Forrest felt bad that the actual person who solved the poem didn't get the reward. He had to give the chest to that guy. It'd be a big problem if he didn't. So I'm not going to go ahead. I'm going to assume that everything is legit and above the table. There was nothing underhanded that happened here. You know, people, Forrest Fenn did something amazing, and he created one of the most amazing treasure hunts out there. Okay. And his poem here is brilliant. Okay. He served his country. He almost got killed twice doing it. And I refuse to sit here and let people destroy that man's name. And although I didn't get the chest, I refuse to let Jack or whoever this finder is to go ahead and walk away, leaving 350,000 people hanging without a solution. I am going to prove the solution. I don't care if there's any money left. What do I got to lose? I didn't sign no agreement with Forrest Fenn that I won't give out a solution. I'm under no legal obligations from anybody. I could do as I please. So I'm putting this out there because I want that man's legacy to contain some dignity. Okay. I want that man to get credit for something brilliant that he did. I find it terrible that the finder basically left us with this terrible ending. And now we got YouTube channels out there destroying that man's legacy, harassing the other searchers, harassing, the finder, harassing me, okay, and coming up with this bogus stuff, creating bogus contests in order to make a profit. I'm not going to sit there and let this happen. I'm a nice guy until somebody screws me. Then I become somebody that you don't want to mess with. Okay. And I'm at that stage right now. I'm done. I'm done with this chase. Okay. I got nothing out of it. And I spent years sharing information. But let me tell you something now. Anybody come out with any documentary or anything like that and actually try to make a profit off of it, I'm telling you right now that if it contains anything that I've shown here, anything with try to wheel or anything like that, you're plagiarizing my information and I'm not going to stand for it. Now, people can go ahead and copy it if they want, as long as they don't try to resell it or re-release it in some other form, such as a documentary stuff. They can't do that. If they do that, they're plagiarizing Sam Smith and myself. Just keep that in mind. So you're right. I'm not entitled to the chest, and there is no reward for solving the poem that I'm aware of. But I could take this and republish it because I own it. I could make a documentary or movie about it. I could do whatever I want with this because I created the solution. Forrest created the poem. I created the solution. The finder found the chest. That's all he did. He's entitled to the treasure chest. He has his own story. But what he can't do is write his story and talk about this solution without giving me credit and without getting my permission. And I intend, and I'm serious about this. So anybody out there considering buying the treasure chest, keep in mind that you are only buying the treasure chest. You're not buying the location. You're not buying access to the solution. If you want that, come see me. I'm sorry about this rant, but I'm really mad about what's going on in the community. It's over. The chase is over. There's no more rewards. The chest is gone. Forget it. Here's your closer. Here's your solution. It's over. You can just stop watching the other YouTube channels. All they're doing is screwing you out of your money. You're wasting your time. They're not doing anything such as what you see here. So, anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a great day. And I look forward to re releasing the solution now that you know everything here. And I'm not going to explain anything like this in the solution anymore. That's going to give me the ability to release the post-it note size solution. The video is probably only going to be 5-10 minutes long, max. And it's all based on this information in the series. So have a good day, folks. Peace.